Welcome to Growing E-commerce. I'm your host, Mike Ryan of Smarter E-commerce. Today, I'm joined by Lucas Gordon, a solution specialist in native advertising at Microsoft. He's got 20 years of experience in digital media and advertising. He's worked with brands like Revlon, Decathlon, and many others, and he's particularly strong in real-time bidding technology. Lucas walks us through Microsoft's ad tech offering, why audience matters more than placement, why he sees Microsoft as a low fraud environment. And we talk about partnerships, including Xander, Netflix, and OpenAI. I really enjoy this conversation, and I hope you will too. All right, let's get into it. So, Lucas, thanks so much for joining us on the show today.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Mike. It's a pleasure.
Why don't you get us started with a quick introduction? What are your skills? What themes interest you?
Well, my name is Lucas. I'm kind of like a broad. I lived in a couple of countries already. I was born in Argentina, then I lived in Brazil. Then half a decade already living in Spain, based in Barcelona. Since, let's say, almost 20 years, I was always working in digital marketing. I was original graduated in business. Then I went to design, like working with brands and that particular aspect. And that immediately drove me to digital. And then at some point, I started working real-time bidding, working in a trading desk back in Brazil, managing all kinds of campaigns, big clients. And from that moment, when I moved back to Europe, I started working at Criteo, which is based mostly in dynamic remarketing, a lot of in real-time bidding as well. And then for a year already, I've been working in Microsoft, especially in the Microsoft Audience Network. I guess my main skills are during this career, I worked a lot with agencies and indirect channels as well, like big resellers or big channel partners as well. This is what I'm working right now for EMEA. I really understand this indirect business, but at the same time, I'm really easy with technology, and I have like a certain facility to explain complex cases into simplifying things to users, which lend me into different aspects, let's say, like more into a sales position, but also doing trainings for broad audiences. So I think that's pretty much it in terms of like recent career and skills around them.
Mm-hmm. So what were you doing at Criteo while you were there?
I worked mostly in two different areas. I was technical solutions as well, but for agencies. I think nowadays we call the position like technical account manager, because we were managing agencies as well. We had like a certain book of business. That was more technical support, but also you needed to have like a lot of strategy understanding and what's the goal behind the user, because agencies also behave differently. They have like a layer in between the advertisers. That was more technical. And at the same time in Criteo, for example, for 1 year, I was responsible of like developing their channel partner approach, let's say, dealing with clients, bringing them in, and of course, later on training once they join, which is very similar to what I'm doing now, but based on more like in a role of specialist in a product, which also has this technical aspect, but training in the Microsoft Audience Network for EMEA mostly. Yeah.
Well, I mean, and I think you picked a really good time or interesting time to come over to Microsoft, because it's just things have really been cooking the last year, 18 months in Microsoft ads. In their ad tech scene as well with Xander and all this talk about Netflix. I want to ask you about that in some detail, but and now of course the era of the new Bing and all this stuff. It's just a really exciting time for Microsoft. But so you're a specialist in MSAN or Microsoft Audience Network. Maybe you could give us like a primer on that. What's the broader context? Where does that fit into Microsoft's offering or landscape? And what are the strengths of MSAN inside of that ecosystem?
Yeah, I guess with everything that you just mentioned, Netflix, Xander, even the new Bing and the AI, I think I'm kind of a privilege because it's everything will be benefit the artists that work the most. I think in the market itself, Microsoft was not being seen as a walled garden, contrary to our competitors, which is a really good advantage in the end. Because what we are starting to do is build our own environment, connecting all the dots and the many things, and even the new acquisitions. We are not seen as that quite frequently, but we have like the biggest gaming community. We have the biggest B2B social network, if any other. Then we have these new acquisitions. We are one of the only ones, well, actually the only one to be able to work on Netflix, ad supported version. Now we are going to the open web with the Xander acquisition, and everything starts from the audience network. So for you, the easiest way to be accessing this super rich environment, ever growing, and now powered with AI, is through the audience network. So I think it's strategical, and we are excited to shape our product in that sense as well, connecting the dots and making everything simplified, because it's so many aspects, so many paths to choose, and we are trying to make it like very digestible for marketers, so they can go for specific metrics that will control the whole exposure. So yeah, I think it's the best time, as you said. Some of the things I wasn't expected when I joined the company. I already knew about Xander, but then immediately everything started to happen, like Netflix, and now recently the AI, which is a revolution, I think, not just for ad tech, but for pretty much everything. So yeah.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, seeing what's going on with Microsoft Copilot, and also on the other side with Google Workspace. I mean, it's just a really interesting approach that both of these companies are taking, and we can only see how the broader landscape is going to evolve too. It's huge topic, but yeah, I think it's a really interesting kind of portfolio that Microsoft has. Like you mentioned, Xbox, LinkedIn, also Netflix, but also Roku. A little less relevant in EMEA or Europe, because at least I'm not sure if this is overall in Europe, but here in Austria, I don't think we have Roku available. I wish we would, but I'm not sure if that's everywhere in Europe. But still a great property to have. And also, I think what's really cool are some of these other ways that Microsoft has gotten involved with alternate search engines, like kind of rounding up some of the other search engines like Yahoo, but also some of these Bing-based ones with really unique propositions like Ecosia or DuckDuckGo, where those are like cool value propositions, and they speak to a certain kind of user. Just these people are sustainably minded on one hand, people are privacy minded on the other hand. So I think there's just like so many interesting little bits and pieces to what's going on in Microsoft's portfolio.
To be honest, I was using Ecosia before joining Microsoft. I didn't know about the deal, and it was so enticing. I mean, it's very exciting as well, and you start to follow. And last year I was in Berlin in a talk. I was giving a talk for one agency, and the Ecosia people came right after me, showing like the accountability of it, because everybody gets curious, like, okay, like how are you actually planting all these trees? For people that are not aware or haven't met the idea, Ecosia is a search engine that every time you do a search, they will plant a tree. It's super nice. And they had planted, I don't know, a couple of billion trees, I guess, by now. So yeah, it's very cool. And then the other one, DuckDuckGo, is more about into privacy. And I think for especially, I don't know Austria, but Germany is super aware of the privacy. So that is probably very popular there. And yeah, we have a specific deal with them as well.
Yeah. I mean, they're really cool kind of companies there. Like Ecosia, I was a little skeptical myself too. I was like, okay, they're planting all these trees, but I remember, so I used to live in San Francisco, and in the Presidio, this big park there, they had a problem there. Like, it's full of all these trees, and they were planted by the US Army, I believe, years back when that was a military base. And you can't just like plant trees. Like, they were planted way too close together, and now, however many 100 years later or whatever, it's a big problem in that park that the trees were not really planted properly. And like, I was just reading about Ecosia one time, and they take it very seriously. They are doing a serious job of the project. So, because I was a little afraid, like, is this greenwashing? What is this? But it's quite a serious project. So But why don't you tell us about some of the possibilities that advertisers have with MSAN then, and particularly in e-commerce? I'm interested because this is an e-commerce podcast with an e-commerce audience.
Yeah. To be honest, I was just giving a training specifically on that. So I think the most looked for, the one that every e-commerce wants to make it happen, is dynamic remarketing. That's the easiest way of like improving your conversion rate. And in our case, it's very easy to set, to be honest. I'm coming from Crete, which is like mainly focused on that. I think like 50% of the business there is all in dynamic remarketing or even more. So for me, to be honest, it was a surprise. I was expecting it to be the easiest on the market, but actually I think our solution is super easy. You just place like an extra snippet of code into your tags, and you can start already like tracking product IDs in your enhanced data layer. So that's the main thing that you are able to place, let's say, to improve your conversion rates, lower your CPAs. So dynamic remarketing is one thing. The other way, like if you want to expand, let's say, you can do, of course, feed-based campaigns. For dynamic remarketing, that's a must. But one thing that is super cool, even in the case that you're not able to set the tags, in the audience network, we have what we call in-market audiences, which is simply business categories that you can tackle without any tagging. So you can use just our data. You don't need to bring any of yours. And you can start benefiting from all this environment that we mentioned before. Like in the end, we put out over 20 billion sign-ons every day, and we connect them in market audiences based on intents. Like, okay, is these people looking for car rentals, for example? So we have a specific vertical on that. And then we have sub-verticals like, okay, family car rentals, this kind of thing. So for example, I can see very easily in the future, like with the new Bing, this kind of search being encompassed there. So we'll be able to offer in-market audiences that are broadly more clever, in a sense, more aligned to the actual user intent. So for retail, for e-commerces, I think it's that you can go straight away with dynamic remarketing. You can set simple remarketing as well. I will go for the dynamic one if I have the choice. But then benefit from our in-market audiences, even if you don't have any tags. Give it a try, and they definitely bring business.
Yeah, for sure. We're running some dynamic remarketing as well, and we're seeing good results with that. And also in comparison to like Google, of course, has dynamic remarketing too. You got to understand that these are there's a lot of unique users on Bing. These audiences are not necessarily totally overlapping. There's going to be incremental users that you can only reach, or incremental audiences that you can only reach through Microsoft Audience Network. Do you have like any figures off the top of your head about the size of the incremental market for Microsoft?
I have I think November data in which we had like at least 60 million users that Google is not able to reach, for example. We are reaching them, especially in the US. But these numbers are like growing a lot, especially, I think we will talk about that later, but with the Xander acquisition, we are like, our mentality, our setup pretty much is we still understand our first party data, let's say, in the audience network, and we find these very same users on the open web. So we are reaching like these users, let's say, in a bigger base that we had before. So that's the main idea as well of going to the open web, not just relying on syndicated partners, but also on many different kinds of publishers. So it's around 60 million users that Google, for example, is not able to reach, and way more for Meta and Pinterest, for example.
And then with Xander moving kind of from the pond to the ocean, that's a pretty cool time. I mean, what about like price and positioning relative to competitors? I mentioned comparing you to Google before. How do you see MSAN relative to like Google's offer?
Well, to be honest, the Google offer is in terms of like, let's say, is not exactly the same product compared to our audience network. They have the GDN, I think, the Google network, but this is like the difference is based more in web than in actual first party data like ours. I mean, They do have everything when you're logged to your Chrome or something like that through your Gmail. But in our case, this is like the difference. We also have the Edge browser users and also Windows 11, for example, users. We also understand them. But our offering is quite different. Plus, disregarding, we will talk about CPCs and everything later. But the reality is that everything is how can I say, transparent. So everything that you do in the ads network, you have like full visibility and also full possibilities of blocking. You can simply go there, like a domain, and you exclude it from your ad group or campaign, or even from your whole account. So that's something that, for example, in the new products that Google is shipping, like Performance Max, it's like sort of a black box still. So this is something we are listening. We are getting these complaints a lot. And also in our case, I think, and this is something that surprised me because I wasn't aware when I joined Microsoft. We have like a really good vision on privacy and brand safety. And in that sense, one thing that can't compare at all to the rest of the market is I see really low volumes of fraud. When you push like a list of your publishers and you see tons of publishers that are like pointless, or you have like a big volume on clicks, but conversions are like zero or are not actual conversions. I've seen in DSPs, for example, that you had to add an incremental CPM to ensure that it was human browsing and not crawlers or bots or actual fraud. While in Microsoft, I think our clients, they really stick to us because the results that they get are for real. And that's really important in the web. And I hope all the web goes through that in that path. Then talking about CPCs, I usually push these benchmarks for some big partners as yours. From time to time, they ask me on specific markets. And I think in a few verticals, for example, travel, we are in a very good situation in terms of CPCs. It's like a cheap moment. Imagine this is a stock, right? This is a good moment to be investing because we have like low CPCs and good results at the same time. I think we had like a flood last year, especially on travel, for example, because of like the demand that was like suppressed through the pandemic. This year, we are starting to see normal numbers and things are balancing. So yes, this is a really good moment. And especially we are starting to bring new traffic from Xander and everything. So it's a good moment to be in the Microsoft Audience Network, in my opinion. You will get most of the results and you will be one of the first in place. So it's a really nice opportunity.
Yeah, I mean, we've looked at like kind of what does a dollar get you on or euro or a pound, what does it get you on Microsoft Audience Network compared to like GDN, and it's hard to make a perfectly apples to apples comparison. They are different in different ways, but we were seeing that basically there was more volume available on GDN, and CPMs were a bit lower. But so I think there's a case to be made for it. But on the other hand, with Microsoft, we were seeing that the quality of the audience and the quality overall was just a lot better. Like the click-through rate was a lot better, and the CPC was way better. So this was kind of like, I can't make a super strong generalization because we haven't looked at the data like across the board to do that or something. But looking at some cases, we've seen that maybe Google is a better volume play. But I like to see some performance there too. Maybe it's short term of me, I don't know. But Microsoft seemed like a real winner on performance and quality from what we've seen. I want to rewind for a minute to this fraud topic that you mentioned, because I'm not a fraud expert. I know the topic comes up a lot. I'm just wondering if you could explain maybe the why, or do you know why that might be? Is it a technology on Microsoft's part that might screen that, or is it what could be explaining an effect like that?
Yeah, I think there are many components. First of all, in many cases, when you're working on different channels, this support from, Double Verify, EAS, all these providers, let's say, it's paid like on an extra CPM, let's say, or an extra percentage on CPC. While in Microsoft, it's like embedded in all campaigns. You don't have to do anything on that. That's one thing. But the most important one is that, I guess, is that everything is first-party data in our case. So as being so, we have direct access to the clients. There is no third party. So in the third party is where you can get like frauds and clicks, mostly, and there are like many different vendors in that area. So I guess those are like the main thing. And then of course, as we are building this net, and we are like always pushing for safety. For example, we could do the other way around, as we discussed it before. We could be building audiences through the Xander browsing and bringing them to the Microsoft Audience Network. We are not doing that. We are doing the other way around, because the web is totally, there is way more fraud in the open web. So we are doing it on the other way around. Like from our safe space, we are finding the same users on the open web. That's it. But not like bringing the open web inside. So that's super clever. I think the way our engineers thought about this. So that's probably one of the main reasons that prevents fraud as a thing. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, so can you, like, maybe it's somehow a related topic. Could you give us some scope here about how a given site gets added to the network? Or am I understanding you right that it's sort of agnostic to the site and it's more about the audience first instead of the placement? Could you, like, are there criteria about how a site gets listed or not?
Yeah, usually what I would tell about this, and I had this very same question from one of our clients, like what's the criteria to consider like a publisher good enough? But the reality is that this is a thinking that comes from an open web, from a real-time bidding experience, in which some people are doing allow lists or deny lists constantly, or they are doing, like, even as it was before, like specific deals, like private deals or guaranteed deals. While in our space, we are not into placements, where we had like tons of questions, especially, for example, on msn.com. Well, I just want the info pane, the main news that you get, super nice spot that you can even split into 3 different products if you want. But the reality is that in the Audience Network, we are not working on any kind of placement. We offer you audiences. We offer our clients specific audiences, and that's the way of we propose as thinking. Of course, if they really want, no, I want to target just these 4 domains or just these news publishers or any sort of demand, we have the Xander team as well. We can drive them there, and they will move forward into open web, let's say, even on native environments, as the Microsoft Audience Network is in native as well. But our main drive is selling audiences that work for your business purpose. That's it. So yeah, to be honest, on our supply side, I'm not exactly sure how they include or not a publisher. What I do know is that they get for these big networks like Fox, BuzzFeed, and then with all the different subdomains or domains that they may have.
Yeah, that's an interesting view on it, because, like, you might take a placement as kind of a proxy for an audience. Like, I think that my audience is here at this placement, but instead you're saying, like, well, we know the audience, we can identify the audience, so it doesn't matter exactly where they are. We'll find them wherever they are, kind of. It's an interesting view on that. And more recently, audiences have become kind of baked into search campaigns, and I've heard some skepticism, some criticism of this. People saying, well, there's no bid adjustments available on this, I can't opt out. How do you view that change? How would you frame a change like that? What would you say to an advertiser who's concerned or unhappy about those settings?
Yeah, well, to be honest, I had my years of account manager as well. So over time, you really like to have many kinds of optimizations, because this is where you shine, right? You can create your own methods and see this happening. But the reality now, especially in our field and even on some of our competitors as well, is that it's super broad. There are many channels, many different things combining many different signals over the same users. So it's getting super complex, especially on self-service platforms that the user will drive everything. So I guess everybody is trying to simplify this and try to unify and work in metrics that are actual businesses, because we don't have many advertisers that lives on clicks unless you're in content, right? Mostly they have a business based on ROI, or even sometimes they need to understand the ROAS, but just to add it into their cost of sales. So in a sense, I think the whole market is going into simplifying metrics, managing everything as a whole, and see the potential outcome and just a few optimizations. In our case, as I said before, we are into audiences. So it makes a lot of sense because going for simple as search query, that user is already part of an audience. It's users looking for whatever the query is, like an Italian trip with a family. Okay, so we mix this all together and we understand this user is also looking for travel, is also looking for travel to Italy, is also kids, this kind of behavior. So I think in terms of like for the account managers, it will simplify everything. In our case, of course, initially has some friction because, well, as I said, especially me, I deal with big channel partners, big agencies that they also have their advertisers. So they are used to manage their accounts with their own methods and techniques. But over time, of course, this will be the default, and different ways of optimizing are always there. Like they can focus on being creative, on the design, on having like the best offers as well, or being productive.
Yeah, I hear you. It's definitely the way the market is headed. If we look at Performance Max from Google, or Advantage Plus from Meta, or smart performance campaigns from TikTok, we see that everybody's kind of pulling on the same string here. And there are people who aren't reacting to that as well, or view it more or less favorably. I don't know if there's kind of wisdom in numbers here, that if all the platforms are moving this way, it must be the right way, or if it's certainly a philosophy for how these platforms can work. And I think simplicity is at the heart of it. And yeah, I mean, there are people who are going to view that critically because they feel like it's making it harder to stand out and it's kind of leveling the playing field. But yeah, I agree with you. It's the way the wind is blowing, so to say. So yeah, but thanks for sharing your thoughts on that. I'm wondering, what do I have next for you? So MSAN has been focused on like native ads, retargeting, dynamic remarketing, as you mentioned, for e-commerce. You mentioned first party. I wasn't counting, but you mentioned first party a few times already. So I think I've kind of got a direction where you're headed here. But what sort of signals are you incorporating for cookieless targeting? How kind of future-proof do you see MSAN in the event of cookies getting deprecated?
Well, I think for us, that's a conversation that is super safe because, well, I think I brought it already, as you said, like a couple of times. Everything is first-party data in the Harness network. We collect everything from previously, well, nowadays as well, from our owned and operated publishers in case of MSN and Outlook, or the Outlook email as well. And in LinkedIn is also our own operated, let's say, social. Same goes for the Xbox. So everything we already can connect our users, let's say. Same goes for the search queries. So that's why it's first-party data proof, right? At the moment, some things, for example, are still like cookie reliant, but that will be the moment this actual happens. That's already, I mean, the shift is already doable, so it won't affect us as third-party vendors, let's say. So yeah, the number of signals we collect, that's insane. It's over 20 billion a day. But what exactly, how when we work on the algorithm to understand, like, for example, the potential of our user compared to another, that's, even for me, it's super complex. I wish I would have the answer for this. But yeah, the cool thing for me at the moment is that everything is being added. So if you go for a really complex, as we discussed it before, search on Bing, gradually we are going to be able to bring better results. And we have this advantage of being able to be disruptive in that area because we, as I said, the main idea is going for audiences instead of like just popping search results. So that's super clear for us. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not a a data scientist at Microsoft or anything. I guess, but the algorithm must just be evaluating these signals and looking for the ones that are most salient or most significant. And then, it's probably not going to operate on all 20 billion things at once or whatever, but selecting the ones that are the most significant, and it just has those possibilities in the end, that it can choose from all those. So we're talking about first party, we're talking about cookieless. These were some of the arguments that helped retail media blow up in the last couple of years, that it becomes these own kind of closed, mini owned and operated environments, where there's a kind of good, tight, closed loop in attribution and all these very favorable things there. So I'm wondering, are you seeing any kind of a bubble in retail media, or do you think that it's going to keep growing? Where do you see the trajectory? And also, while I've got you on the topic, maybe I'll ask you about Promote IQ, because I think that, if I'm not mistaken, is how Microsoft ties in.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's something that is very clever from Microsoft as well, because in my previous company, when I was working at Crypto, they were really happy that they managed to get a full solution, including retail media. And we are growing a lot with Promote IQ as well. I don't think there is a bubble. I think we are still in the beginning of it, because the thing is, the retail media, it connects superb offline vendors, I don't know, Walmart, Best Buy, all this Target, all these huge guys. So for them, the movement is complex. At the same time, in retail media, the deals are year-wise. Nothing is done in the, let's say, in ad tech, previous ad tech, everything that is not retail media, that you can do a couple of months, tries, this kind of thing. In retail media, everything is year-long contracts, is involved multiple players. So I think it's the beginning of it. You can see that from time to time, one of these big companies, or even as well as we will be releasing a new deal with this company. Well, this means that full infrastructure and setting them up. And some of these players are also going for their own solution. Even hotel chains are trying to. The idea of monetizing, let's say, their traffic, in a sense, is super tempting for these people, because they got into such a size. So some people are going for companies like ours. Some people are going for their own solution. And I think this will definitely grow, because in the end, it's how the web is shaped as well. It's sort of these walled gardens that they are protecting their audience. So they need to enable value for them. I like to think, as a supermarket, they are always pushing for new stuff on how to set the shelves on everything. Retail media is simple as that. But we are still having to learn. And I think the big push for retail media was the whole pandemic, sadly, that everybody started it wasn't as popular doing groceries. We still had this idea of I'd rather go there and check for new products, but then it expanded for everything. There is nothing that cannot be there. So I think it's just the beginning. At some point, I even thought about maybe applying and trying to go to that area as well, because it's so exciting. It's proof, as you said, there is no cookie apocalypse there at all. So yeah, it's super exciting. If I have to choose an area to apply and maybe a hobby, I will definitely go for that. So yeah, I don't see it dying any soon.
All right, good to know. And you're just mentioning these kind of legacy buying patterns where it's more kind of an old school buying pattern. And I want to hear about Netflix and Xander made a lot of headlines last year, and I'm just wondering if you can bring us up to speed on what is the current status there, because my understanding is that they're running through at the moment these kind of exclusive deal-based, very selective processes. Like Netflix wants to make sure that these are kind of big enough brands that are going to participate, and they're looking for kind of minimum commitments in there. Maybe you could fill us in on the details about where we are and how we got there.
Yeah. Well, initially, to be honest, and this is very personal, when I saw the deal and I saw that, it was kind of a month or two away in between the Xander confirmed acquisition and then finally the Netflix deal. I'm used to this size of project taking years to be in place. but it went super fast. I think the announcement was, I don't know, October, and in December we had like the ad subscription available, and or even in November we started to have like some training on understanding, and of course the speech as well, because as you said, it's super controlled. It's a really premium environment, so the brands like to be. And Netflix also wanted to offer something that is not as annoying. Is every 1 hour. So in the end, it's super digestible. I think if I had to choose, I will definitely go for the ad version, the ad supported version, because it's not that bad and probably the price is good. And initially, even for me, it was like, okay, let's see if they will get subscriptions like on that new model, right? And the reality is that both things worked really well. They are over a couple of million users already on their backend version. And initially, when we started to have the offers on Netflix, what I've been told is that it was everything sold out, or even for this first quarter, pretty much. And now they are starting to get offers again and expanding to Europe. So yeah, this is the scenario. Then on how we are, like, let's say, bringing this to the market is super interesting. It's very aligned to the average user. What we are seeing is that almost 90% of the users on the paid, let's say the full version of Netflix without ads, and the ad backed subscriptions are very similar. So this is it's kind of good for them. Even the content that they consume, let's say, is very similar. So this is really good because it brings access to, depending on the genre as well. And my understanding is that you can set campaigns based on main genres, for example, drama, and then you will target these particular genres. So yeah, it's super compelling for young audiences as well. The content on Netflix. And then out of the, I think, 10 biggest sitcoms and movies watched last year, 6 were on the Netflix. So that's a way for you to be spoken. So yeah, it's a super interesting deal. And yeah, we are currently internally we are having like a lot of training. So that will be part as well of being a specialist on Iaris network, being able to bring this to our interested clients as well.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the way I kind of think about the whole thing, like we were talking earlier, every hotel website or every website that's big enough starts to realize that they have a potentially monetizable amount of traffic, and this idea that everything's an ad network. And meanwhile, we also see really parallel movements in retail marketplaces where people want to, if a retailer gets big enough, they start opening up to other sellers, and then a big part of that is ultimately probably so they can make their own retail media play. But if you'd compare a strategy of, like you mentioned earlier, Walmart and Target, and Walmart has gone much more in an Amazon-like direction where they've brought in, I don't know the numbers exactly, but thousands of sellers and kind of a low bar to entry. And then Target is maybe dozens or perhaps 100 plus, I'm not sure, but a much smaller scale. And they've done that on purpose to have this premium effect, to stay on brand, to hopefully offer a better customer experience. And then I think that's exactly, to make that metaphor, that's kind of the direction that Netflix is going here with this very exclusive premium stance, and not just opening the floodgates the way that maybe some people initially expected. But I think it's going to be a really interesting space to keep watching. We were talking earlier right at the start about this new AI technology coming out and how it's going to change so many things, and I'm wondering, because I don't think I've seen any real commentary or announcement in this direction, but if you see an area of application for AI to like the audience network, I've got a kind of a hypothetical use case. I know that right now, like, you have a partnership with Shutterstock for stock images for creatives, and in the back of my head, I'm wondering if maybe DALL-E, for example, could be alongside Shutterstock in the future. What do you think about an idea like that, or do you know of anything else in the works?
Well, at the moment in that particular field, everything is super new. Me in particular was responsible for one area of, like, when you're setting creatives, for example, one way of doing it is importing from your domain. I was working in that particular field. It will be an
Mhm.
alternative to using a Shutterstock image or uploading any image for an advertiser. I haven't heard anything on that, but it's that conversation outside of Microsoft is super complex because of like copyright. There is like a
Mhm.
big thing going on, especially with artists. Like, okay, is this embedding my, let's say, style, and then reproducing something? Is this being paid or not? So I'm not sure when or if this is going to be added. But yeah, I've seen the DALI things and they are impressive. Yesterday, I've seen some examples of like, okay, draw me like a living room in like 70s style. And when it's done, it offers you a couple. And then, no, but put like a fireplace. And then 30 seconds, there is like an amazing fireplace. So I can't even imagine the potential on this for native advertising. Remember, imagine in the future if we, native, the main idea is to have the look and feel on the publisher. Imagine if that you can bring this look and feel into a contextual couple of signals and then tell the ad will look, program it every single time based on the user behavior and in the page there is. So yeah, the possibilities are astounding. They're like super broad. We already offer like some image selection if you base it on contextual signals, but it's a steady image. So maybe in the future we can produce like a dynamic image that will be shot by AI. So yeah, I don't know if we are going to get this kind of thing, but those are clear possibilities right away. In Microsoft, it's insane because, well, the ad tech is one of the main benefits through Bing that is going to be the first like search engine that in which you throw anything, and it's already ongoing. Some people already have like the version. If you don't have, you can go to bing.com/new and get like wait for to get access to it. And this is already there, and the signals, we are already getting them, and this is already added to the artist network. But in Microsoft, we are also doing Copilot for Office, which is,
Mhm.
this will benefit everybody because we are doing this on a meeting. We can collect notes. We use Excel and Office and PowerPoint all the time. And the impact on that is we can't even imagine. And the same goes for the people working on backends, for example, with Azure. We are all the queries that you usually do that demand like at least SQL, SQL, or some language code, that would be massively simplified. I think I was there when Copilot started on GitHub, and that was surprising. And now I see that is everywhere. I think I will have like an Alexa or something like that at some point that will do everything for me. Like, okay, fry some eggs, and it would be so amazing that everything is going on. It's so cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's I'm speechless when I watch these demo videos or conceptual videos, for Copilot. It's just nuts. And I don't know yet what amount of that is already available or what amount of it is like sort of a vision, but it's just insane to see what's going on here and how fast it's moving. So I think that like wraps up the questions I have for you about MSAN and that kind of field. I just wanted to pick your brain with a couple of more general questions I like to ask. It's a question that for me takes on increased importance or significance in the e-commerce context, in this post-pandemic situation where we are in a recessionary environment. Like, how do you define growth, and how do you identify unhealthy growth?
Well, you can have growth in one particular area, but I like the term development because development is all together. So I like to think of growth as development. For example, when we had this conversation we just had on AI, okay, this is super cool. We can have like tons of products, like some competitors are doing it, but they are not releasing anything to society. So they are just using it for own benefit, for profits, for algorithms, this kind of thing. But the reality is that, for example, when you open this and you add this to an office deal, that I don't know, like I guess 70, 80, 9% of society that works in a computer, they use any sort of text editor, calculation sheets, and you made it available. It's like they are learning to code without having to go into coding. It will simplify the lives so much. So I think that's growth. That's development as a society. It will make everybody super productive. In our case, in our particular area, we like to empower marketers. That would be like what we see as growth. But me, in my point of view, I think I do a lot of sports. I really like sports. And when you train, and I've never been into competitive sports at all, but when you work out, you do sports every day, you try to get like at least 0.1% better. So this constant reaching of perfection, looking for an unreachable perfection, that's my individual sort of growth. I have like the patience and the steadiness and the discipline. So that's how I see growth. And in our field, you have to do way more than that because everything is changing so much. That's the thing in ad tech. You have like no steady year, let's say. Everything changes, new products all the time, new technologies. Sometimes they go for the cookies, for example, and everything changes. That's it on an announcement. So you need to be also very prepared, and that's when it comes to the evolution work. So you need to be that little growth that you're adding into a bigger goal. So that's my main idea. As a society, I think we need to think always in development, in benefiting the most in a single process. And individually, I think this little each day a grain. So that will be growth for me.
Yeah, I like that because that like, daily 1% is what 99% of people don't do. So that consistency and combined with adaptation, like you mentioned, and working on the greater good. I like all those ideas a lot. What are the workforce skills and cultural attributes that digital companies need to outpace the market? I mean, you just mentioned like consistency, adaptation. Do you see something more specifically on top of that?
With all these new technologies that just aroused it, let's say, because everybody was speaking about AI, but not as much as now, and nobody saw it so clearly as we can see now. So now you go to Twitter or any page and then you say, tapped on applications to use AI. So we need to be very innovative in a sense of benefiting from this. So I think for all the companies, that were all the CEOs, I guess, and even boards should be thinking about now. Okay, how can we benefit our business and of course our society as well? I think especially for boards with all these new capabilities. So being innovative in a sense, because we had ways of doing things in many companies, in many verticals, hundreds of year old methods, let's say. Maybe the processes are slightly different, the machines are different, but the outcome is still a car, is still a building. How can we really impact from this kind of technology, it will shape everything. That's for sure. So that will be the main thing. And then, of course, the second one, and I think this is very common to companies, is the hiring process. Also change it because we're still very based on, like engineers that they're really well into coding and they have all the knowledge and deep knowledge in, JavaScript, or we see sometimes, for example, people that still need to develop in COBOL, C++, all languages because they're really using to that language, and that ship is gone. That's not relevant anymore. Now that will be done. You need to have the best ideas. So the top-notch, let's say, professional is not the 90s super engineer, calculator, Wikipedia kind of people. Now it's joining tons of different stimulus, let's say, and having that really rich idea that will bring more things to more people. So that's the things that company need to be aware of, that these professionals should be different in a near future. Yeah.
I think those are both really great points. And I'm really interested in this idea about like, what are the implications of this low code or no code thing here? I saw Benedict Evans, you might know him. He was writing just earlier today, like that maybe there's a fallacy with the no code idea. Like not everyone's just going to overnight become able to produce an app or something like that, because not everyone has an idea. Not everyone knows how to think in that way and be able to provide instruction to a machine. And I definitely agree, like there's just going to be, how do you collaborate with a thing that has in principle infinite knowledge? How you have to be able to synthesize. The people with the best ideas will win, because I've said this before on the podcast, but you know, we're all already carrying the world's information around with us in our pockets with these smartphones that we have. And not everyone uses those smartphones in the same way or to the full potential. So I think that there's still this very human need and ability on top of the technology. Because right now, like if you're not like ChatGPT is not sitting there by itself coming up with great ideas or something like that. It just responds to what we bring to it, and so it is currently, yeah, it's something that we're all going to have to learn to use and maximize. So I totally agree with what you're saying there. I think those are great thoughts. Um,
This is the cool part, because this is where culture comes in. The people who are able to communicate with multiple cultures, multiple point of view, because as you said, ChatGPT is not producing content by itself. It works for humanity. So in the end, these professionals that are able to understand more broadly, more humans and their needs, they will be able to ask the proper questions and get the right nice results. So yeah, having this multiple stimulus, let's say multiple cultures, a broad background will serve more people. So that's one way of thinking, of course.
Let me just ask you before I let you go, any projects or companies or people you'd like to shout out?
I usually follow these different browsers, people building like Mighty with different ideas that encompass VPNs, this kind of thing. What else? Yeah. Then I follow a couple of like geniuses like Ray Kurzweil and all this, the singularity. I'm really curious because we are almost there. We are 10 years away from the singularity. So, and I like to think on this guy as a futurist. So this is something that really pushes me as well. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. You know what? I haven't checked out Ray Kurzweil in a bit. I'm gonna have to. That's an awesome tip. And it's so funny. I can remember I have an identical twin brother, and my brother and I, when we were like, I don't know, when we were younger, we would just be boring our poor mom to death talking about the singularity and AI and how this stuff is coming and it will happen. And it's like, it's very eye rolly and potentially until it's not. And here we are. So yeah. But thanks so much for sharing your time, your expertise, and your opinions and experiences with us. Really appreciate that, Lucas.
No, it was a pleasure for me as well. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening to Growing E-commerce. And if you enjoyed this podcast, please consider sharing it with coworkers, friends, or within your professional network. We really appreciate it. This podcast is produced by Smarter E-commerce, also known as SMEC. To learn more, visit smarter-ecommerce.com.